am so excited to welcome Dr. Jana Martin to the Inspired Hive podcast. Dr. Martin served as CEO of the American Insurance Trust, but not only has Dr. Jana Martin been a practitioner for over 40 years and served as CEO for 14 years, she retired last year to pursue some new adventures in consulting and public speaking. She's amassed a wealth of wisdom transitioning from practitioner to business leader and serving in clinical, teaching, consulting, and volunteer roles throughout her career. She now consults with practice associations, for-profit and nonprofit companies and their boards, and she's super active in volunteering both in the psychology community and her local community. She brings a leadership mindset and an excitement and passion for all she does to the Inspired Hive podcast. Let's hear what they have to say. I have been inspired, probably secretly, by Jana for many years. I had the privilege to get to meet and work with Jana. I was serving as a volunteer on the telehealth task force over 10 years ago, and she was there as the CEO representing a major insurance company in our professional world. Most of us think of CEOs as kind of unapproachable, and Jana is the exact opposite of that. She was so approachable and personable and a real incredible relationship connector. And I'm absolutely thrilled, Jana, that you're here to chat with us today and so that I can introduce you to the Inspired Hive. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. The honor is all mine. And wow, what a great introduction. Thank you so much, Margo. I've treasured our friendship over the years, and it's just a delight for me to be one of your guests.
Well, I realized in kind of contemplating folks to invite here is really the career path of all that you have done and the wealth of wisdom that you've amassed, and now on kind of that next level journey. I thought it would be super exciting to hear some of the kernels and wisdoms that you've gleaned along the way. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear, though, where your story began.
Well, I'm going to start about when I was born, but I'm not going to go through my whole life. But I think context is important. I was born in Montgomery, Alabama, and I was blessed to grow up with two very loving parents. And I was raised in the Presbyterian Church. My brother and I were taught by example and by action that relationships are important and that you take care of others, including those that you don't know. Even though we were not well-to-do, Margo, our family adopted needy families for holidays. Our family was involved in charitable events, and my dad would literally give the shirt off his back to help anyone, which I witnessed many times. So service was a part of our values. My mom volunteered at a hospital and in a lot of other efforts, and later worked in the public health care field. My dad, a salesman, grew up in a children's home in the North. So he lived the experience of benefiting from the kindness of strangers, and he never forgot it. Even though I was raised as a girl in the South, my father taught me that I could be whatever I wanted to be, and that I could do whatever I wanted to do, as long as I made sure that I took care of others and that that was my responsibility. But more importantly, it was very rewarding. So one of the most important things he told me, which I have tried so hard to live by, is, Jana, there's no one in this world who is more important than you. And there's no one in this world who is less important than you.
Wow.
So that centered me and has allowed me to understand the value and power of community, relationships, and respecting and taking care of others, no matter who they are. But in addition to my parents, I was influenced by the TV show I Love Lucy, the book,
I
the
love
book, The Little Engine That Could. Clara Barton, and the church, among other things.
Oh,
But I highlight these things because these are major forces that impacted my thoughts about what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I ended up wanting to be either a minister, a comedian, or a psychologist. What I did know was that I wanted to be a part of making things better. I mainly wanted to help young people and their families to have better lives. And I realized that a lot of the kids that I wanted to work with and help probably weren't going to be in church in the first place. And so choosing to be a psychologist seemed best. And it's a decision I've never regretted. I feel very proud to be able to carry on my parents' legacy of helping and supporting others.
wow. I've known you for so long, and yet some of these components of kind of your story and your journey are things I have no idea about yet. And I'm so
Yeah.
grateful for you sharing them. It's interesting to focus on where kind of what those values are, that you're very clear on
Right.
those, and that you had a very clear connection to those growing up, and that has
Yes.
been part of what has been that life of service in all the things that you have done.
Yeah.
I too am glad that you chose the psychology route. Because I think it's such a gift to be able to have that overarching connection with the folks that we serve, and that it's not limited by house or form or kind of
Right.
the necessary ideology of that. It's more encompassing.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Um,
thanks for letting me share that.
yeah, I think it's interesting too that your dad was in sales, because I think, a lot of times when we get into working in psychology or mental health care, we come through this training approach where we don't learn much about the business. We don't learn much about the, um, I guess, more of the kind of financial or kind of
Right.
administrative side. And what I have reflected upon many times along the way is really we're in sales. They don't tell us that in grad school.
Right.
And you might take a class about sales or marketing, as an undergrad in some other area, but that's really what we're doing when we're working with
Yes,
folks, is helping, we're hope deliverers, right? We're selling
that's right.
them on this path that things can be better, and that
Right.
there's certainly lots of ways to get there, but it's
That's
interesting
right.
you had that influence early on.
Yes. Yes.
Today, when you think about kind of the things that inspire you, and especially
Mhm.
now as you're kind of on that next level,
Mhm.
retiring from one amazing journey and kind of working in that next aspect of your career, what inspires you with that transition or with the day to day now?
Very good question. I would say that I'm mostly inspired by people, words, and actions,
Mm,
mostly all together as opposed to separately, because words without actions don't have nearly as much meaning as they do with action. I'm inspired by people who try. Doesn't matter what they try, they're just trying. Inspired by people who have survived and thrived despite all kinds of obstacles,
mm,
people who help other people, words that stimulate and motivate and cause us to reflect. And so I use a lot of quotes in the work that I do. And the actions that end up, not surprisingly, based on what I've told you, supporting others or making an impact, even a very small impact, because small impacts get built upon, and anything that leads to change. I'm also very energized by looking at the power of connections and the meaning that those connections and relationships can lend to one's individual life, but also the lives of others. And I'm really inspired, strengthened, and somewhat mesmerized at times by the act of envisioning or dreaming. One of my mantras is First, you get the dream, and then the dream gets you.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. I love quotes, as I said, and I find them very motivating and inspiring. And I think one that kind of frames the kind of inspiration that I like is by Eleanor Smith, who in 1927 became the youngest licensed pilot in the world at age 16. And she said, it had long since come to my attention that people of accomplishment rarely sat back and let things happen to them. They went out and happened to things. I love the concept of happening to things and
Mhm.
not sitting back and waiting for them to happen to me or waiting for somebody to ask me to do something. I'm also very motivated by the goal of improving everything I touch, put my labor where my love is, and I enjoy seeking and creating innovative and hopefully cutting edge spaces, and then the people and the things that go in them. I believe and have experienced that really the best launching pad for our journeys and happening to things are our connections and our relationships. One of my favorite things about a personal and leadership journey is who you have with you along the way.
Mm.
You know, people that we travel with, not just literally, but figuratively through this life, they can inspire us, teach us, enlighten us, catapult us into things, comfort us, give meaning and purpose. And so it's really important that one focuses on who are you spending your time with and
Mhm.
how are you using your connections to help make their lives better, but your own as well. I also enjoy putting things together. I mentioned earlier partnerships and all of that, putting visions and ideas and people and opportunities together. And one of the things that I thought about, especially in my early years of doing therapy with clients, is I love doing puzzles. And I have often seen puzzles as a metaphor for tough situations that we face in life. So, for example, you start out with all these jumbled pieces and you're wondering, how in the world is that going to look like that picture that's on that box? It seems sometimes overwhelming as well. And people approach doing puzzles very differently, just as we do in life, approaching obstacles very differently. Some people are straight edge boundary people. Let's get the framework. Let's kind of have this kind of containment of sorts. Other people are tray people or sorting people. And so we all have our own approach to how to approach puzzles or obstacles. And sometimes people won't admit this, but I will. You're trying to put pieces together and you just know that these pieces are going to fit. And you're so excited about putting them together and then they don't. And then you try to force them to fit and that doesn't work either. And you can get very frustrated. And so sometimes the best thing to do when working with those puzzles, a la obstacles, you just have to walk away sometimes. And sometimes you come back to it and almost within minutes, you
Oh,
go,
yes.
oh, those two pieces fit together. Oh my goodness. And you find them and you put them together and you're like, yes. Well, what's interesting is that those pieces were there all along. They
Mhm.
were right in front of you all along. But sometimes you may not have seen them because you were too frustrated, or that's not what you were looking for. And so therefore you didn't see what was right in front of you. And again, I think the metaphor for dealing with life and obstacles is, when you're facing a tough issue, it takes patience and trial and error and self-care and a willingness to see things differently. And in the end, if you persevere long enough, you end up with something that you've made whole. It's worth it. It's a pretty picture. And when you're dealing with it in life situations, you end up seeing something that helps other people.
Oh, wow. there's so much in what you just shared that,
Yeah.
the concept that life is happening for us and not to us. I love that metaphor of kind of really thinking about life as a curiosity rather than
Yeah.
this thing that has to be absolutely perfect or executed, in the way you initially imagined. Because
Right.
I think we've all had that experience. We've got the big picture idea that
Mhm.
sets us on a journey, but sometimes we take a few different paths, or along the way, we see something even bigger or a
Right.
different aspect of how that journey can contribute or be meaningful. The other aspect of what you shared about who you journey with is
Mhm.
so very important, and there's so many aspects to that that we experience both in our training, but I think even more importantly in our professional lives, like who we're
Yes.
around, who we're
Yes.
listening to, where we're getting our information from. I turned the news off back
Mhm.
when I was on internship, because I realized I didn't want to know what accidents had happened to know what I was going to be dealing with tomorrow when I went to work at the hospital. Turns out that was a great lesson in my life, because I don't have to deal with all those seeds that are
Right.
planted and all the things that go on in what I think is more of an entertainment world. But I don't choose to bring that along with me, and I've made space for
Mhm.
other fuel and other things. And it's also important, I think, that we bring along people that aren't as far along as we are, and it's that
That's
giving of
right.
service back to others, like in
That's
that
right.
mentorship or growth. But we still also need to have mentors. I was hearing some of those components in terms of all that you were
Mhm.
sharing, that I think it's just such a value of recognizing what we glean along the way could be so helpful for others just starting
That's
out.
right.
The mindset in all of that. And
Mhm.
when you talked before about the words and how
Mhm.
important the words are, we're seeing that in the research, but we're also can experience that very quickly when we change the words we use. Wow, so much to unpack there, but I wanted to comment on that. I just
Yeah.
love all of those nuggets. I'm curious if there's something you would share that might have been your biggest lesson, or
Mhm.
maybe thing that didn't seem like it was a blessing at first, but has
Mhm.
turned out to be exactly what was part of that puzzle that you needed along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I'll be glad to share that. Just to be clear, I've had many things that did not turn out the way I wanted them to, or the way that I thought they should have. I've learned that sometimes I get in my own way, which,
Ah,
as related to the puzzle metaphor, can block my vision and understanding of how different things might be valuable. And I've learned that what I thought had to be the outcome often isn't a had to be after all, that there's value in being open to how a different outcome can be good for you. So, the lesson I've learned is that sometimes things don't turn out the way you want them to, they actually turn out better. The real life example that I had was when I was applying for internships, and I had this number one spot. I envisioned myself being there, and I just knew that that was the perfect match for me. I was very fortunate to get into several internships that were wonderful, but I got on the waiting list for the only one that I thought was the right place for me. I decided not to wait because I knew that some other places were really good. During that day, that awful day in the old days, the way that you would get the call, I started reflecting, well, wait a minute. What? Why did I think that was the only place? Yes, it's good for this, this, and this. And then I thought about, but this place, I didn't really let myself absorb all that this place could give me and how it offers things that the other place didn't. And so it was kind of this aha moment. You were wrong that this is the only place, this number one place. And so within about 30 minutes of kind of going through all this, I thought, well, I'm going to call before I hesitate too much longer, and accepted what ended up being the most amazing, phenomenal experience I have had in my entire career, because it taught me so much about being a psychologist. And I allowed myself to realize, this is better than you ever would have had before. And of
Mm,
course, that meant that when I got there, I was ready to soak up every single thing that they offered. And I
mhm.
am still in touch with people that affected my life back then. And I think about a quote from Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers.
Ah,
He said, often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else.
it's so powerful when you think about kind of that journey of self-talk that you went through in that moment. And for many of us, we have that lived experience that
Mhm.
conjures up some very similar even now, physiology, but it's it really is about that shift of how you thought about it, and
Mhm.
had you not made that shift, it could have been a very different experience that you had
Mhm.
versus the sponge of soaking in and enjoying what life was presenting for you, for your career, and so many of us get stuck in this is how it has to be because I thought it that
That's
way
right.
and not have that flexibility of, all right, well, maybe there's some other things that could be as a result, or just thinking about it in a curiosity as opposed to
Mhm.
calamity. I really appreciate you sharing that because I know it'll land for a lot of folks that listen, but it's applicable to so many things even today that
Yes.
are happening and that next thing that we might want to be doing that
Mhm. Mhm.
we may or may not have a clear picture of, but thinking about the openness to what could
Yes.
be, as
Yes.
opposed to how it must be, is really
Right.
a giant, giant lesson.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure that that internship that I thought was the only one for me would have been great, but
Sure.
it's hard for me to imagine that the experience that I had where I chose could have been imitated or replaced.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, getting out of your own way
Right.
and being open to not focusing on what you didn't get or what didn't work, and believing that only that one thing can make the difference. You then begin to see those puzzle pieces. You then begin to see, I have a huge impact on what I'm able to see and benefit from. I
Mhm.
happened to that internship. I chose to soak up all that I could there. And
Yeah.
it gave back because it wanted to nurture me. And we have a lot of power. We just
Yes.
often use it in ways that don't benefit us or others the best.
Well, and we have to take action, right? You can't
Yeah,
sit back and just let those things,
right,
evolve. You are an active participant in that. And that's what
right,
creates that flow of what you gained and what you could offer. And
right.
I think so much of the time we don't recognize we're the ones in our own way because,
Yeah,
it's easy to say, "Oh, well, that didn't happen or somebody else did that." And so it just
yeah,
when we take that 1,000% responsibility for
yes,
our situation and our next step, then we're in full control of that. And like you
right,
said, then you are happening to it, not the other
right,
way
right.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And envision things to be better.
And
Yeah,
that they could be that possibility. I think,
that's right.
the belief that there's all sorts of aspects that can change from what you contribute is really key,
Yes.
as opposed to that belief that all these things are contributing to where you are. And
Yeah.
that really is a shift in thinking that's huge for the work that we do, for, what we do next,
Hmm.
from a business sense or a therapy sense or just an interpersonal
Right.
sense. So,
Yeah.
Jana, what are you working on now?
Yeah.
Want to give you a moment to share with us what
Yeah.
this next
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, well, you highlighted some of it in the introduction, which I appreciate. But, what I'm trying to focus on is to make sure I continue to put my labor where my love is,
Ah,
both in volunteer work and consulting with the nonprofits, with corporations on leadership identification and development, versatility, change. Love doing and have been fortunate to be invited to do several keynote addresses at conferences and conventions. And I am absolutely delighting in lunch and long conversations with friends, more time with family and time outdoors. And I'm really enjoying the flexibility to connect with things about which I'm passionate, also the ability to and flexibility to think creatively about how to support others and improve everything I touch. And I'm continuing to be incredibly grateful for all that I've been blessed to do and experienced, and for the people who've I've connected with and who've been on the journey with me.
I am just so, so grateful that you were open to sharing some time and some of your sweet wisdom with us today.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if there's anything, last bits of advice or anything, a nugget you'd like to drop as we're heading into the close.
Sure. Can I drop 3 nuggets?
Sure.
It's hard to break it down.
It
So
is.
the first major thing is, and I'm going to use a quote again from F. Scott Fitzgerald, who said, never confuse a single defeat with a final defeat.
Ooh.
And then another quote from Miss Piggy. She said, never eat more than you can lift. Keep moving forward, find and develop your strengths, and take
Mm,
care of yourself. That's nugget number 1. Next, relationships are empowering.
mm,
Soak up the value of connecting with others personally and professionally. Helen Keller said, this is one of my favorite quotes, the most beautiful things in life are not things. They're people and places and memories and pictures. They're feelings and moments and smiles and laughter.
mm.
So I say, may we have more of these. And then finally, don't underestimate the power of envisioning. Imagine our possibilities and seeing yourself where you want to be. Then happen to it.
And that's a direct Dr. Jana Martin quote right there. Oh, Jana, I have loved this conversation and sharing time with you. I am so appreciative of your willingness to share this goodness with the Inspired Hive
Mhm.
podcast. And as you know, I pick a quote before we even get started, and I end on a quote. And here it is, because it's amazing
Okay.
to go with all we've chatted about. And this one came from
Mhm.
Melinda Gates. Deep
Mhm.
human connection is the purpose and the result of meaningful life. It will inspire the most amazing acts of love, generosity, and humanity. And wow,
Amen
that
to
captures
that.
us from the start of this call to now. And
Yes.
I just thank
Yes.
you so much for being here. And we will catch you next time on the Inspired Hive podcast. Hey, thanks for spending time with us on the Inspired Hive podcast today. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Inspired Hive Podcast and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on what's coming up next. And as always, live inspired.